Hi, it's Mr. Wyman, and I'm going to read for you part of our science textbook. And this is for an assignment using Drip the Drop, where he or she, it is going to communicate the power of ice. So let's read a little from our textbook, this information that we can use in our video, where Drip is going to be involved in a story and you're going to have Drip explain a little bit about what you learned from this text, okay? The information from our science textbook. Let's dig in. Ice is everywhere. You probably know where to go to get some ice. Indoors, you find a refrigerator and look in the freezer. Outdoors is a different story. If it's winter and you live between Montana and Maine along the border with Canada, ice is everywhere. Every pond, creek, and bucket of water is frozen. In the warmer parts of the country and during the summer, finding ice outdoors can be a challenge. Some places are cold all year long. Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, and Siberia have ice year round. Antarctica, which covers the South Pole, is the iciest continent. More than 95% of its land lies under thick ice. In some places, the ice is 4,300 meters thick. In the winter, frozen sea water forms an ice shelf around Antarctica, doubling the continent's size. If you live in snow country, you know what to expect. Usually, starting in December, heavy snow falls, covering everything under a white blanket. During a heavy snow year, the snow may stay on the ground until March or April. Then it melts. Ice off the coast of Greenland. Look at all this ice. Polar bears on the ice in the Arctic. Not Antarctic, in the Arctic, near the North Pole. Here you have an Alaskan glacier, and a glacier is like a river of ice. So it's flowing between these peaks, right? A glacier ends at the sea, just like a flowing river of water will dump out or empty into the sea or ocean. Same thing with a glacier. Glaciers. What if the winter snow didn't melt during the summer? In some of the colder regions around the world, more snow falls than can melt in the summer. Snow piles up and up. The layers of snow at the bottom get compressed, which means packed together, pushed together, and turn into pure ice. Then when the ice is about 18 meters thick, the M stands for meters, it begins to move. Moving ice is a glacier. Oops. Moving ice is a glacier. Glaciers are rivers of ice that gravity pulls downward. Scientists can keep track of how fast glaciers move. An average glacier advances less than 1 meter each day. A glacier in Greenland holds the speed record. I don't know how to pronounce this. Jakobshavn Glacier is speeding along at more than 35 meters per day. That's really fast, actually. Glaciers now cover about 10% of Earth's land. Wow, that's a lot more than I would have expected. I did not know that there was that much glacier around the world. They are found in all of the world's major mountain ranges. All the ice in the world store about 65% of the world's fresh water. If all that ice melted, sea level would rise about 79 meters. Wow. Icebergs. Icebergs are mountains of ice drifting like islands in the ocean. Icebergs are frozen freshwater. I was wondering this just the other day because they're in the ocean. They're not saltwater. Where does all this frozen freshwater come from? Icebergs come from glaciers. When a glacier moving down a valley reaches the sea, Pieces at the end break off. These chunks of ice may be as small as cars or as big as mountains. The largest iceberg ever measured was 320 kilometers long. That's really long. We see only a small part of an iceberg. 7/8 is hidden beneath the water's surface. 7/8 is a fraction. We should draw that and see what it actually looks like. That means only 1/8 is above the surface. A small fraction of the whole iceberg. Icebergs in the North Atlantic can last up to 2 years before melting. Larger icebergs in the Antarctic may last 10 years. Someday, icebergs may be a useful source of fresh water. Ice could be harvested and melted. Whole icebergs might even be towed to countries needing fresh water. It's interesting. It's like taking ice out of the freezer, right? Icebergs form when pieces of ice break away from the face of a glacier. A large iceberg might extend a kilometer below the surface of the sea. Ice history. Before refrigeration, people used ice to keep food cool. Ice was harvested from frozen lakes and rivers in winter. You may remember me telling you, but my grandfather actually did this. He and his father, my great-grandfather, would have a sleigh in northern Maine and with horses that would pull this sleigh like a sled on the snow and the ice, and they would go to the lake and they would cut chunks, huge cubes out of the lake, put it on the sleigh, and they would bring it to a building and they would pack sawdust around these chunks of ice in order to keep it from melting even into the summer months of the year. And they would deliver this ice in the summer to people who would have ice chests. And those were the old-fashioned freezers or refrigerators that would keep food fresh for a little bit longer. The ice would keep these boxes cool. There was no electricity back then, and the ice was the way to keep the temperature lower to store food. So people waited until the ice was at least 60 centimeters thick. Then it was strong enough to hold the ice workers. Horses were used to plow a frozen lake to clear away the snow. Then the horses pulled a special tool that scratched lines in the ice. Workers cut along the lines with sharp saws. They used poles to push large sheets of ice to ice houses. There they cut the sheets into smaller blocks. Ice houses looked like barns. Inside, the ice workers carefully stacked and stored the ice blocks. They spread straw or sawdust over and around each block to keep it from melting and sticking to other ice blocks. So I remember my grandfather telling me about the sawdust, and oftentimes it would be in connection, the ice houses would be in connection with mills, and that's where you'd get the sawdust from cutting up logs and making planks and lumber. Ice workers mark lines on a frozen lake. This must be an old photograph. Large sheets of ice are pushed to the ice house. That's interesting. I remember my grandfather telling me like he would get cubes out of the ice, like giant cubes. Maybe they were like pre-cut to fit the ice chests. And my grandfather and my grandmother, they had lots of antiques in their house, and I remember they had an ice chest, and I remember seeing it in the corner. Most homes had an ice box. Throughout the year, horse-drawn trucks carried blocks of ice to homes in towns and cities. The Iceman used ice tongs to handle the heavy blocks. Ice blocks could range from 11 to 22 kilograms each. The Iceman then used an ice pick to fit the block of ice inside the icebox. Children loved to see the ice truck on hot summer days. They crowded around when the Iceman pushed the door open. There was sure to be a sliver of ice for each of them. What a treat on a steamy day. Why pipes burst. Now you're going to get into the power of ice. So pay attention for your information that you can add to your drip the drop script. Pipes supply water to houses, schools, and other buildings. They are made of strong materials like plastic, copper, cast iron, and steel, but sometimes pipes burst. Do you know why? Water, like all other materials, contracts as it cools. But once the temperature gets down to 4 degrees Celsius, an amazing thing happens. As water continues to get colder, it starts to expand, which is unusual because other materials get smaller and smaller and smaller as they condense as they cool. Like the colder they get, the smaller they get. But that's not what happens with water. Once, okay, between 4 degrees Celsius and 0 degrees temperature Celsius, which is the temperature at which water freezes, water expands. What that means, the ice needs more space as it changes from liquid to solid. If liquid water completely fills a container, it will break the container when it freezes. Ice needs room to expand, or it will break its container. How can you prevent pipes from breaking in really cold weather? If the pipes are not used during the winter, drain the water out. If that is not possible, make sure pipes are well insulated. Pipes can be wrapped with insulation or they can be buried deep underground. Another solution is to leave the tap open just a little bit. Then the expanding water can push out the end of the pipe. The water might freeze in the pipe, but the pipe will not break. If the tap is closed, the water is trapped. Then something will break when the water freezes. It's like a balloon. You can blow it up to the point where it eventually doesn't have any more space and it just pops. Remember those icebergs in the northern and southern seas? Why do they float? There is a connection between floating icebergs and breaking water pipes. Do you know what it is? Why do pipes break? Because water expands as it turns to ice. The amount or mass of water doesn't change, only its volume. If the mass stays the same, but the volume increases, that means it gets bigger, but it still weighs the same. The density of the ice changes. If ice is less dense than liquid water, what will happen when you put ice in water? It floats. That would be another really interesting thing for you to add to Drip the Drops script. And you could have him turn into ice in order to float around like an iceberg. Good luck with your projects, and I hope you enjoy learning about the power of ice.